to Real Women, Real Life. It is always awesome to be with you. Can you believe that we are almost at the end of the year? Where has this year gone? It has flown by. I really believe that you have and trust that you've had a great year. But you know what? I want to tell you and remind you that if you have not had a good year, if you're watching this program right now and you're feeling exhausted and you're feeling tired and you're feeling like, you know what, I just want to go sit in a corner somewhere and rock myself to sleep for a very long time. You know what I'm talking about. If you're feeling that way, I want to encourage you and tell you, you know what, don't give up now. The end of the year is so close. Carry on, champion on until the end. There is something still great in store for the rest of this year. Often we get to this time of the year and we start feeling weak and we start feeling almost lethargic, like we don't want to carry on, even with the things that God brings our way. But rather, let's take these last few weeks and this last month or two of the year and say, we are going to just go on strong forward. We are going to stand strong. We're going to stand firm. And we're going to continue in what God has shown us and told us to do. On today's program, it is going to be truly special. I am going to be introducing you to a woman that is absolutely amazing. I have come to know her just this year, and I can honestly tell you my life has become so enriched by getting to know this beautiful woman, beautiful on the outside, beautiful on the inside, a woman of God who has a story to tell. And often you might think that you are alone in the situations that you are going through, that maybe you feel nobody else understands. Maybe you feel you were born on the wrong side of the fence, so to say. Maybe you feel that life has just thrown you the most awful hand. And how can you possibly have a life of success? How can you possibly have experience a life of goodness after everything that you have been through? If that is you, I want to encourage you, urge you to stay tuned to every single minute of this program. This woman has a testimony and a story that will encourage you and make you realize that all things are possible when you are in Christ Jesus. Her story will make you realize that whatever ashes are in your life, whatever has become destroyed, whatever in your life feels like it's at the end, you know what? It is not, because God is in the restoration business, and something that He is phenomenal at doing is taking your terrible situation and transforming it into something beautiful and something enriched and something that will not just be a blessing to you, but every person that comes across your path will stand and look at you amazed, marveling at the fact that God is a good God. Your life will be a testimony. And if you're wanting that type of life, if you're wanting that type of journey, stay tuned to this program, because the testimony that you are about to hear from a woman whose life was in ashes and turned into absolute beauty is going to change your life. I'll be back with you shortly and introduce her to you. Well, welcome back to Real Women, Real Life. I am so blessed to have a woman with me on a beautiful set today in her office, who I not only think is amazing, but that I really have come to see actually as a mentor in my life. Angelique de Toit, welcome to Real Women, Real Life.
Thank you, Tracy. What a privilege to be here and just to be chatting with you and spending this time with you. So thank you very much.
Oh, it is my great pleasure. I must tell you something about this beautiful woman. The first time I ever met you, I sat opposite a desk from Angelique, and I was so in awe with the passion that Angelique has for life. And Angelique, I know that our viewers are going to be blessed today, but particularly about your story. And today I want to share with you, Angelique's going to share with you her testimony, which is outstanding. So if you've got anything planned in the next half an hour, I want to encourage you just to put it aside and to stay tuned, because the story that you're going to hear from Angelique is going to so inspire you that I know by the end of this program, you're just going to want to get up and go change the world. I can guarantee that. Angelique, so of course I know a little bit about you. Don't you want to share with us, our viewers, who is Angelique de Toit?
Well, I'm very privileged to be married to a wonderful man called Ernest du Toit. I'm a mother of children that are now young adults, whom I absolutely adore. I am a speaker, a seminar facilitator, a businesswoman. I wear many hats, but above all, as you say, I really have a passion for life. I have a passion for people, yes. And of course, above even that, yes, a passion for the Lord.
That is very evident. That is very evident. I very seldom find, well, no, let me refrain. I don't very seldom, but when I find a woman of God that after I've been in your presence, I just feel almost feel like a giant. You know, I can just, my shoulders feel a bit further back. I just feel like I can just do anything that God brings my way. And that is the type of person that you are and that you've become for me personally. And I'm sure to everyone that you come into contact with. Tell me, Angelique, let's talk about your story, your testimony. And I know that we could probably speak for maybe 3-4 hours about it. So in a condensed version, can you give us a little bit about who Angelique was growing up and where and how God has brought you to the point that you are at today?
Well, I think there's a wonderful scripture that I'd love to share with
Yes.
you, because I think it puts in a nutshell a starting point and the journey. And it comes from 1 Corinthians, and it's verses 26 to 31. And it starts off saying brothers, but we're going to say sisters. Think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards, and not many were influential, nor many were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. He chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. And he chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things.
Wow.
And the things that are not, to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him. It is because of him that you are in Christ Jesus, who has become for us wisdom from God. That is our righteousness, our holiness, and our redemption. Therefore, as it is written, let him who boasts, boast in the Lord.
Wow.
So when I share my story, sometimes I think, it could sound like boasting, but really it's about boasting in the Lord and what he has done. Because for a certainty, if it wasn't for God in my life, I know, and I'm sure many of your viewers can attest to the fact that if it wasn't for God in our lives, we would not be where we are today. And I don't believe that any one of us achieves success on our own. I believe every single one of us who have achieved anything in life do it because we're standing on the shoulders of other people who've been prepared to pay the price and go before us. So I really want to share that the very first person upon whose shoulders I'm standing is my mother, a woman whom I love dearly, a woman who's gone to be with the Lord, a woman who taught me much of the principles that I live by and much of the principles that I teach. And she was a woman who had a lot of suffering in her life. But if you met her, Tracy, you would not know the path that she walked. She was always beautifully groomed.
Wow.
Didn't matter that we had nothing, and I mean nothing. You would never have said that poverty was an issue in our lives. You would never have said that pain was a major part of our lives. She just had this incredible way about her that influenced us more than she will ever know.
Wow.
It is often regretful for me that she's not alive today to be able to see the fruit of what she deposited in our lives really coming to fruition now. And I really know that much of what is accomplished has been what she deeply established in our lives. And we've gone on to do exactly the same with our children and with our business. And that is to give them roots and to give them wings, because the roots give the establishing, but the wings allow us to fly. And that's exactly what my mother did for us. And so she was actually the main breadwinner in the household, married to my father for 38 years, but he was an incredibly volatile man. And we never knew from one day to the next what was going to be. We never knew what the trigger was going to be that would set him off. And he just was quite unpredictable, which leads one to feel quite insecure and to not trust relationships. So my mother taught us that women are the glue that keep the household together, and we cannot afford to come unstuck. And she also taught us that you never quit, no matter what.
Wow.
And with many of the things that we experienced growing up, a lot of violence, a lot of, harshness, a lot of behavior that made you wonder what the rest of the world was like. And yet when I needed a haven, I would go back to my mother because she would create that environment. And so that really established a great strength in me. My father, on the other hand, was a man that would one day be doing something and then the next day we'd be doing another. So I would get home from school and my mother would be packing the little few boxes that we have, and I'd say to her, where are we going? No, we're moving again. And with the result, Tracy, I went to 13 schools from grade 1 to standard 6.
That's very unsettling.
Incredibly unsettling. And of course also too, you never have the chance to build any meaningful relationships. And then at the age of 14, we weren't on the breadline. We were way below the breadline. I remember many nights no food, many nights no electricity, sleeping on the floor, cold bath water. I remember my mother going to the greengrocer and saying, just give me 4 potatoes to help feed my family. And then my father came in one day in a bit of a stormy mood and sat me down, and he said to me, you are no longer going back to school.
Wow.
You need to go and find work, and you're going to contribute to this household.
And you were 14.
I was 14. My children today are in their early 20s, and you look at them really finding their feet in the big wide world. So what you know at 14, I have no idea.
Yes.
But because my father's word was law, you obeyed. You didn't discuss, debate, negotiate. I just knew I had to go and find work. And of course, I had so much insecurity in my life, so many fears driving my life, and so much uncertainty of the future. And yet I knew I needed to do that. And I didn't know God in those days. I didn't acknowledge God in those days, but somehow in the inside of me, I was trusting that God was going to help me, because I knew I was in a sticky situation in my life. And I found a local community newspaper, and it had a 2-line advertisement in it, and it said, apprentice hairdresser required, no experience necessary, immediate start. And I thought, well, this has got to be the job for me. And that was my introduction into the world of work. And I often say in my seminars that the need drives the solution.
Right.
So I looked at the other apprentices, and I knew their need wasn't as great as mine. And I thought, if you're going to do that so well, I'm going to do it a whole lot better. And I really made a decision to try and take that opportunity in my life to make something of my life. But that lasted only for 2 years. Until one day, 2 very official men walked into that salon, and they were from the hairdressing union. And they wanted my school leaving certificate and my birth certificate. And of course, I could produce neither. And so with the result, I then lost my job. And so life gave me another thumbs down. Doesn't matter how hard you try, doesn't matter how hard you work, success will never be for you. And that actually became the lie that I started to believe.
You started to believe it. So Angelique, just for us to recap, you only then got to standard 6. You only managed to get an education of a standard 6, which in our terminology nowadays is a grade 8. Yet when I look at you now, you are such a woman, besides of absolute beauty and grace and discretion. You are a successful woman. So God obviously had something very, very cleverly planned for you, even though you had no idea what it was at that point. So we're going to break very quickly, because you want to hear the rest of the story. Do not go anywhere. You'll be back. We'll be back with you shortly so you can hear the rest of Angelique's story. Welcome back to Real Woman, Real Life. I am so privileged to have Angelique Toit with me on today's program, and she's sharing her story, her testimony, her life-changing story. And before the break, we spoke about how Angelique went through such an incredible, challenging childhood, where she was forced to start working at the age of 14, only got to a standard 6. And now we're at the point of your story where you're 16 years old, you've lost your job, and now the big question is, now what?
Well, you know, I think having lost one's job, you realize now I had no future before, so I seriously have no future now. And I unfortunately went and did, I think, what many young girls go and do, and that's to try and find the answer outside of oneself.
Yes.
And I met up with a man who was a bit older than me, but it was quite an alarming experience, Tracy, to realize that he had exactly the same issues in his life as that my father had in his life. And one realizes that if you don't deal with those issues in your life, you just keep attracting more and more of the same. And it's intriguing to me in the seminars that I run, how many women say just that. I just keep attracting these same sorts of people. And so that was an even darker space in my life, as far as the message of relationships and how relationships don't work in life. And I fortunately was in a situation where I looked at my mother's life. And I love her and honoured her, but I could never understand why she chose to stay with my father through all of that aggression, that violence, that unhappiness, that poverty. And I guess I made that decision that I did not want to find myself in that situation. And the only one good thing he really did for me was he sent me to secretarial college.
Okay.
And I guess little did I know that the Lord was going to start using that as a starting point to open a door for me to get a real job, so to speak.
Wow.
And a couple of years later, I met the man that I married, who is now the father of my children. But I was 21 years of age, and I, before the wedding, started to feel old enemies of fear and anxiety and panic. And many of the things that I'd experienced as a child, I was starting to feel them rise up in me again. And it took me to a very deep place, a very dark place, a very depressed place, where I was somewhere between merely existing and contemplating death. So great was the fear in my life, so great was the unknown in my life, that I believed that tomorrow wasn't mine. I was actually afraid of tomorrow, and I went through this very desperate space of, during the day I would wish it was night, and then at night I would wish it was day. And so it was a terrifying place to be in. And I know we've got enough research today to show us what that level of stress actually does to an individual. So I went off to the doctor, and the doctor told me it was pre-wedding nerves, and after the wedding, you know, it would all settle down. And of course it just got worse and worse. We had to cut our honeymoon short. I was sent to a specialist. They took 2 weeks to examine me, every which way you possibly can. And I thought I had some dread disease. I thought they're going to come and tell me you've got 2 weeks to live, and this is what's happening in your life. I was so thin and so bald and so black under my eyes from the levels of stress that it was actually quite terrifying. And this very dear specialist called me back, and he sat me across his desk, and he said to me, "Angelique, we can't find anything wrong with you physically. We believe the problem is a whole lot deeper." And I smiled, because I thought, if I tell you what is going on in the inside of me, you will send me off to one of those little white padded cells, put me in a jacket, and I will never, ever, ever come out, because what was going on in my mind was absolutely terrifying. And so I went back to the church that we were married in, all alone. My new husband thought I was quite neurotic. He wasn't sure about all of this that was going on. And in the moment, the defining moment in my life, the choir walked on to stage, and in the front of the choir was a woman who looked like an angel, who'd come down from heaven to live amongst men. And the depth of need in my life was so great that I looked at her beauty, I looked at her peace, I looked at her angelic being, and I thought, I don't know what you've got, and I don't know who you are, but I need desperately what you have. And so that service came to an end. I don't remember what was preached that day. I just remember getting up from that seat, walking to the back, and thinking, if nothing happens today, I don't know if I'll be alive tomorrow. And who should be standing there but that one woman? And her name is Jenny Ward, and she's the second woman upon whose shoulders I am standing. And she said, "I don't know you, but here is my name and here is my number, and you'll have a friend for life."
Wow.
And you know, that was 30 years ago, and we are still friends today. And so I went around to her home, and she said to me, "Tell me your story." And when I told her my story, she said, "I'm not surprised you're so ill." She said, "It's like you have drunk the poison, and you're expecting the other people to die." And she said, "They're not going to go anywhere soon. So what you need to do today is you need to make a choice to forgive. Because you have so much anger, so much bitterness, so much unforgiveness in your life that it's actually literally killing you on the inside."
And if I can interrupt, Angelique, you didn't know the Lord at this point. So to be told you must forgive, you know, as Christians we hear it often. So we become used to the phrase, "oh, forgive." But considering the journey that you had gone through, now to be told by a stranger, in essence at that point in your life, that you must forgive all these people, that must have been a huge thing for you to absorb.
Well, you know, if I could just share with your viewers, I believe implicitly that it's one of the biggest gifts. Number one, that you can receive is the forgiveness of God. And number two, the biggest gift that you can give yourself is to forgive those that have hurt, harmed, or humiliated you. That doesn't mean necessarily reconciliation. but it does mean that you have the freedom to make a choice around that decision to forgive. In other words, if that person is going to continue harming you, do you stay? And growing up in the childhood that I did, I caution against that, because I don't believe ever that God created us for abuse.
Oh, that's powerful, and that is a powerful message, even at this point. We as Christians, we get told forgive 7 times 7, etc., etc. But as you say, do you stay? Specifically talking in the situation of abuse. And you've answered that beautifully. Okay, Angelique, so now you've met this beautiful woman. She's taking you through a journey of forgiveness, of restoration. And I know from this point in your life, something happens, miraculous happens.
Yes. Well, I had an encounter with God on my knees, on her floor, in her lounge, a day that I will never forget in my entire life. Because God, you know, that beautiful scripture that says God takes us, translates us from darkness into his glorious light. And it happened just like that. He literally took me out of the miry clay and set my feet upon a rock. But at the same time, it doesn't mean to say you don't have choices.
Yes.
You've got to make choices within the framework of that salvation. Salvation doesn't mean automatically everything, you know, comes right. I had to make serious decisions about forgiving. I had to make serious decisions about letting go of what I call my Fenta trailer, because it was overloaded.
Yes.
And God did a glorious thing. But I had this wonderful sense for the first time in my life that everything is going to be okay.
Yes. And it was.
It was.
And from that point on, God took you from one strength to the next strength to the next strength. And now if I look at you today, the woman that you are, that I've only had the privilege of knowing you for just a short time, but wow, what a story of reconciliation, of restoration, and the truth of ashes to beauty. That's exactly who you are. That you epitomize that scripture, Angelique. And you know, our time is so short, and we've come to the end of this program, unfortunately. But the good news is, next week we're going to carry on chatting with Angelique. And the beautiful thing, Angelique, do you want to share with us very briefly about the book that you've written to put your whole life basically into this couple of pages, so to say?
Yes, absolutely. It's called Standing Tall in a Falling World, and I wrote it with that title very specifically because it does often feel that our world is falling. Yes. But if we will live by the principles that God has given us, we can stand very tall. I'm not very tall, but I stand very tall on the inside, and that's what it's all about.
And that is what we're going to carry on talking about next week. We're going to be introducing Angelique's book to you, which is now an international book. It's gone around the entire world. And as far as I know, we're even going to be giving a couple of copies away of her book on next week's program. So Angelique, a final word to our viewers before we see them again next week, but just to close off this program, a final word to encourage them.
God created you with abundance. God created you with success in mind. And all he's waiting for is for you to give yourself permission to succeed.
Wow. He's just waiting for you. He's just waiting for you to give him permission. So I want to encourage every single one of our viewers to take the testimony and the story that you've heard from Angelique today and realize this is a real life person. She went through all of this. She's come out strong. She's come out victorious. And whatever situation you're going through in your life today, know that God will do the same for you. Angelique, thank you so much. We bless you and we love you. Thank you for being part of Real Woman, Real Life.
Thank you. It's my privilege.
We'll see you next week.
We will.
I'll be back with you shortly. I'm so sorry we had to end the interview right there. I'm sure you're sitting on the edge of your seat wanting to hear the rest of the story. The great news is that next week's program is going to be a continuation. We are going to continue chatting to Angelique and hearing the rest of her story. How did God take her to the next level? What did God use to bring success into her life? God uses many different things, many different avenues, but what did God use in Angelique's life to take her to the absolute next level? A woman with no education, a woman that was born into a situation where the average person would look and say, she's not going to amount to much. But take a look at what God has done in her life. And on next week's program, we are going to continue the story. You don't want to miss it. I really want to thank you for joining me and also want to remind you to go to our Facebook page. I don't know if you've visited it recently, but we are really on a campaign to raise those likes. Why is that so important, you might wonder? Well, I've come to understand the importance of it. The more people that like the page, the more people that we can influence, the more we can get an understanding of who is watching from which area of the country, which area of the continent. Yes, a big shout out to everyone that's watching across the borders of South Africa. I know that you are watching. So thank you so much, even to those who make contact to us from all over Africa. So it's important for us. So please, if you have not yet gone onto our Facebook page and liked it, it is such an easy thing to do. Just go to our Facebook page, which is TBM RWRL, and all you've got to do is go click the little button that says like. Once you have clicked that button, you will receive our daily updates, our weekly updates. You'll get to hear about the fun competitions that we're going to be having. And might I add at that point, in the next few weeks coming up, we are going to be doing some fantastic giveaways that you do not want to miss. So if you are on our Facebook page, you get to see all that information. Thank you so much for joining me on Real Woman, Real Life. Till next week, same time, same place, and we will continue the testimony and the beautiful interview with Angelique. I'll see you next week.